to what we had. Okay, so in this lecture, we're going to look at just try and get a sort of intuitionist view of reality. So when philosophers talk about realism, as we're going to discover in painful detail over the next couple of weeks, they have lots of different ways of talking about what is reality and how we should decide what reality is, and so on and so forth, or how we know what reality is. And one idea is intuitionism. It says we know what's real, right? We all, right? I mean, pens are real and ghosts aren't real and unicorns aren't real and cups of tea are real and hope and purpose aren't real and your GPA is the realest thing that exists. You know, we all understand that and we know that. So what we're going to do in this section is we're going to try and scratch a little bit below the surface on intuitionism. And fortunately, we have 120 students in this class who all have an intuition. So this is the result of the questionnaire that Steve sent out earlier. So if ever you wanted to know what students think about what's real, this is the answer. Okay, you're all pretty sure that rocks are real. It's a coin toss as to whether or not aliens are real. You're pretty sure that stars are real. There's one student that doesn't believe in rocks and one student that doesn't believe in stars. I'll ask later whether or not that's the same student or whether you're differently skeptical. Most of you are pretty happy on atoms. So I'll just, for reference, this dotted line here is anything within this dotted line here is indistinguishable from a coin toss. If I asked 37 coins whether they wanted to come up heads or tails, I'd expect to see them somewhere in here. Okay, so chi is indistinguishable from a coin toss. Aliens is indistinguishable from a coin toss. Most of you believe that other people have minds, but some of you aren't totally convinced. I've marked your questions that you all submitted, and I have an opinion on whether you have minds, which I won't share. Holes. More of you believe that holes exist. Excuse me 1 second. Here we go. But I'm just going to quickly run through these and then we're going to discuss them in a minute, right? That's a hole, right? More of you think that holes exist than think my mind exists. If my mind were a hole, you'd be more convinced that I'm not right. Well, let's just skip on. Okay, a walk. Does a walk exist? When I say I'm going for a walk, am I going for a thing which is real? And the majority of you think yes, but we're really slipping down here. Numbers. I have 1 teaspoon. Is there anything real about oneness? There's no point in discussing whether or not we are one with the universe if we're not quite sure whether or not one is a thing. Or maybe there is, but that's another discussion. Purpose. I am impressed that from Hong Kong's finest. I mean, you guys, you had to work hard to get through the system in Hong Kong, right? You made it through school. You made it to Hong Kong U. Cream of the crop for Hong Kong, and it's a coin toss as to whether or not purpose exists. Okay, well, we can discuss that one as well. So, but here's the trick. So, intuitionism is floundering a little because the notion that we have an intuition about what is real. I mean, I have an intuition about what is real, but a lot of people don't agree with me or don't agree with my intuition about what is real. And if between 37 students who answered a survey, they have different intuitions, something interesting is happening. So let's look at. I'm going to bounce into a sort of easy way to do this, and we'll get into your intuitions, and I'll pick on you. So Richard Dawkins, right? If ever I want like a go-to person for a nice foil for good philosophy, let's go to Richard Dawkins. Okay, so Richard Dawkins says the only good reason to believe that something exists is that there is real evidence that it exists. Okay, so now this was set for the sort of additional optional extra reading. So what we can do is we can go to here, because Richard Dawkins gives us this answer as to what is real and what is not real, or what we should accept as being real and what we shouldn't accept as being real. And all of you have the same thing. If you have evidence for it, then we should accept it as real. And if we don't have evidence for it, then we should say not accept it as being real. And I can only assume that 40% of you didn't do the reading, because 40% of you, or maybe 60% of you, depending on which one of you is right, couldn't agree on whether or not purpose was real. I mean, do we have evidence to believe that numbers are real, or do we not have evidence to believe that numbers are real? I mean, why do we have a disagreement on this one? So let's go through this, and this is the point where let me see, can I share screen and see more of you? Yes, maybe I can. How about this? Okay, so this is the point where I'm going to ask you guys to unmute and tell me, or someone to unmute and tell me why you believe that rocks exist, or the one student who thinks that rocks doesn't exist, why do you think rocks don't exist?
We have seen rocks.
Right, you've seen them. Were they real rocks? I've seen Captain America.
I've touched it. I've smelled it.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. Oh, okay. What I want to do, I want to flip back and forth between seeing you guys and just seeing my notes on the screen. Okay, fair enough. So we've seen it, we've touched it, we've held. Do I have a rock? I don't have a rock nearby. Okay, we've held it in our hands. We have sensory information about this. Okay, so can I ask the person who didn't believe in rocks, or given there are more people on the call now, anyone else who doesn't believe in rocks, why don't you believe in rocks? Go on, one brave soul. Are there, do I see comments coming in? Two things on the chat. Everything comes from the Big Bang, exploded from nothing, so a rock is not real. So a rock is nothing. Okay, so here we have an argument that says that what we are is fixed by where we come from. We came from God, therefore we have an imprint of the divine. I am divine because I have a divine origin. I came from monkeys, therefore I am nothing but a monkey. I cannot elevate my station above monkeyness. I came from nothing, therefore I am nothing. Nothing that came from the Big Bang is real because the Big Bang is not real. Okay. Now, this is now interesting because then if we compare that with I saw it and I touched it, that says there are many things, mugs, pens, which I've seen and touched, but because my fingers are not real, because my fingers also came from the Big Bang, touching is also not real. So this then suggests that, contra Richard Dawkins, we should believe in things that we have evidence for. Evidence is a thing which exists in the world, which came from the Big Bang, which is not real. Therefore, even though Jacqueline says, I've seen it and I've touched it, she may have evidence, but the evidence is not real. This is a problem. Okay, so let's work through. I mean, you know, I put in rocks because like rocks is the easy one, and now we find that already we've discovered that our evidence for rocks doesn't constitute evidence. Okay, how about aliens? Who believes in aliens?
I think that there is aliens because there are many planets in the universe, and there are some planets that lives are possible to be there. So I guess there are aliens outside because there are too many planets, and we cannot discover all.
Right. Okay. So you've not seen that. Have you ever seen an alien?
Not really.
Okay. So you've never
unless
seen. Unless I've got my concerns about Professor Palmer. I reckon. No, I've never seen an alien. But we have indirect evidence, sort of reasoned, rational evidence that says it stands to reason that there should be aliens. Okay, who didn't believe in aliens? Who's going to admit to not believing in aliens? Because I have evidence. I have evidence
So,
that at least
Mike,
15 people don't believe in aliens. David,
So-
do you believe in aliens?
Jacqueline wrote, I think it depends on the definition of aliens.
Ah, ooh. Okay, well this, okay, so, oh, okay, there's comments in the chat box. I need to pull this down so I can see the chat as well. Okay.
And then a probability answer. The probability of their existence can never be zero. Ooh.
Okay, so, ooh, okay, so we say, now, if an alien is real, it's either real or not real, right? So this is an interesting thing on probability, right? If I say, am I going to flip heads or tails, right? Prior to flipping the coin, there's a 50-50 chance. It says, you know, if I did it 1,000,000 times, half a million would come up heads, right? But here we have a different thing, right? Because this is the aliens are either existing or not existing. You're not saying if we had a million universes, half of those universes would have aliens in. We're saying our universe either contains aliens or it doesn't, but this is now a limit on what we know. So this is a sort of epistemic constraint. Now, depends on the definition of aliens. Okay, so how would you define alien? Right, okay, so let's take Sen's comment where he says people coming from a home country. Right, so I am an alien in Hong Kong. Right, so aliens exist in that sense. And so now we have a question that says, okay, well, aliens certainly exist if you mean foreigners, and they may or may not exist if you mean men with antennae coming out their heads. Okay, so definitions become tricky. And also we have with aliens, we have this issue where with rocks, we can see it, we can touch it. With aliens, we can't see it, we can't touch it, but still we've got something else going on. Okay, so let's go for minds. I'm going to skip through these slightly quickly. I'm not going to cover everything because time, but here we go. Who thinks I have a mind? Okay, so Jacqueline thinks I have a mind. Jacqueline, why do you think I have a mind? Have you ever seen it, touched it, smelt it?
No, I've never touched it, smelled it, or do anything to it, but sort of through interactions that you gave us, it's apparent that you do have a mind so that you could sort of formulate response to questions or formulate this lecture.
Okay. Question. Does Siri have a mind?
A man-made mind?
Any mind?
Maybe.
No.
Okay, so I'm now trying to flip between windows. Who says no?
I did. Because Siri is just being programmed to respond to you in a certain way. So whatever you say, she'll respond. So she doesn't have the capacity, not yet, maybe in the future, to respond to you outside of what she's programmed to do.
Right. So how do you know that I'm not programmed to just respond in certain ways?
Because when I ask you an open-ended question, you respond with an open-ended answer and not necessarily just a definitive statement.
That just means I'm better programmed than Siri.
Well, good for you. I mean, maybe you are a super bot that, you know, hiding in HQ that the entire world doesn't know about, which is awesome.
So we've gone for I give responses that make it seem like I have a mind, but you've never seen my mind. I mean, so for rocks, we've seen rocks, we've held them. For aliens, we say it stands to reason there's a rational argument that says aliens probably exist. It would seem unreasonable that they don't. And other people might give rational arguments that say they probably don't exist. Pick your terms in Drake's equation. Now for my mind, so we've kind of gone for my responses. So this is a sort of empirical thing, but it's only slightly empirical because then we're arguing something we've seen something external that my mind would cause. There are clearer boundaries between having or not having a rock than having or not having a mind. Okay, Kai, tell me about that one. What do you mean? There can be different degrees of mindfulness. Ah, okay. Good. So now we have maybe comes back to definitions again, where rockiness is all or nothing, but then minds can be mind involves thinking, and I have a mind because I'm think and I'm human. So other people, right? Okay, aha. So this is then. So I have experience of my own mind. I know what it feels like inside my head, and I don't know what it feels like inside your head, but your head looks about the same as mine. And if we gave ourselves an X-ray, your head and my head would look similar. Whereas if I looked inside Siri and gave Siri an X-ray, the inside of Siri looks different to the inside of my head. So I can sort of extrapolate my experience onto you with more confidence than I can extrapolate my experience onto Siri. So then we have, now is this evidence? I mean, I have evidence that I think. Descartes told me that. And I then sort of extrapolate from what I know of me to what I think I know of you. And then, okay, fair enough, we're going to count that as evidence. Holes.
So speaking about Siri, though, just a minute, something really funny happened in my other class. We were having a conversation about subjectivity, and I was talking about that, and it was related to this kind of question. Now, I have never set up Siri on my computer, and while I was talking, as I was talking about do humans have subjectivity, suddenly Siri blurted out, "I do not understand." I'm serious. I'm serious.
My favorite one for Siri heckling a lecture, it was, so my background is in quantum mechanics. We had an eminent researcher in the field of quantum mechanics who was doing investigations into the fundamental nature of causality and space-time. And they were, you know, they'd done experimental research onto this, and they presented as the posing question at the beginning of the lecture. They said, is it possible to have retroactive entanglement of quantum causality through time crystals? And his watch interrupted him, and Siri said, "I don't know the answer to that question." So yes, if Siri does have a mind, she doesn't know when is appropriate to heckle. Okay. So
Maybe she really does. That's one thing she does know.
Okay, so moving on to holes. Okay, so about 2/3 of you thought that holes existed. Who wants to talk to me about holes?
I think that it exists. This is because that it is not a physical thing, but a concept that when there is no matter surrounded by a lot of matter. So when you have such an arrangement, then that thing exists. And even if you take the example of our readings, that when there is, for example, in conductivity of metals, when there is no electron at a place, there is a positive charge or hole there. So it actually refers to presence of no electron there. So the concept of hole is that there is no matter or in the conductivity terms, there is no electron there. So this concept exists.
Right. So that's the, okay, so now we're saying that a hole is not a physical thing. Like, so my paper here, this is physical, and my hole is not anything physical, but it's a conceptual thing. And as a conceptual thing, it exists. Now, Abdul, here's a question. As a conceptual thing, does the hole exist in the paper or in my head? Because the concept is in my head.
But you made the hole on the paper, so it's on the paper as well, not on your head.
Right. Okay. So now we have a sort of non-local existence that says the non-thing here, which doesn't physically exist, is a creation of my own mind, because it's a concept that my mind has, and my mind projects this concept onto a piece of paper. Therefore, my mind calls into existence conceptually a thing in the physical world. That's awesome.
I think that it's not the thinking of that concept or comprehension of that concept that matters. Otherwise, I can also say that I am thinking about that, for example, there's a hole in this paper. So overall, there is a concept in my mind of the hole. So there is a hole in my mind as well, but it's not the comprehension or thinking of the concept, but it's the actual application of the concept in real life.
Right. Okay. So what we then have, if I've understood correctly, is my conceptual thinking is not unconstrained. I cannot say I'm thinking of a unicorn, so unicorns exist. So there's some interaction of there are edges of paper here, and there is something going on here, and so it's a sort of cooperative effort between something in the world and something in my mind, and the whole exists as this. It's not just in my head, but it's not just on the piece of paper either. It's some interaction between the two.
You could say that it's how we, frame our way of thinking. For example, that if you talk about something that there is a lot of water in one place, but at small place there is a piece of land, so that becomes an island. So you could say that that framework we had said, that the anomaly of land being present in water, that becomes an island. So here as well, the anomaly of whole being present in a lot of matter, that becomes the whole.
Right. Awesome. Okay. Now I had let me this is where two screens would be really be helpful. Can I flick through these? Now I had all of these. But here we go. Let's go on to numbers. Okay, who thought that numbers existed? Lam Yopong, talk to me. Why do you think numbers exist? Because it's applicable. Okay, so I have two coat hangers. The first thing that came to hand. I have two coat hangers. Now, then it's applicable. What do you mean? Why does its application make it real? Counting. Okay. So I can count one. Okay, let's take an example. I'm going to count something. I'm going to do some maths. We ready for some maths? Okay. I spent what? How many years as a research physicist? Let's see if we can do some maths. If I have two people, right? I'm going to take top row. What concept of counting in our minds makes numbers real? Okay. Should we go with that one? Yeah, okay, let's go with that question. Back and forth between, if they didn't exist, we couldn't use them. There's interesting. So here we have utility. it exists because I can use it. And so now we've gone away from now. Okay, quick. Does anyone think that numbers are physical? Because we've already had the distinction. So we said that a whole is not physical, but it's conceptual. In a way where my mind interacts with a piece of paper. Does anyone think that a number exists materially? Okay, so let's I'm seeing numbers ping here, I'm seeing answers ping here. Let's have a, okay, so Jackie then says, if no one's using them, would they not be real? So if humans didn't exist, so let's go for it. Let's work back to a whole. If we say that a whole is a conceptual thing that exists because of the interaction of my head and a piece of paper, then if my head wasn't here, then the piece of paper would be a piece of paper with a bit missing, but there wouldn't be a whole, because a whole has something to do with my concept of it. Now we say, would numbers exist? If I had one star and another star, but no one to count them, would I have two stars? If existing conceptually proves something to exist, everything exists because everything we think of may or may not start to exist. Okay, so unicorns aren't useful. I can't use a unicorn for anything. I can't even use the idea of it. I can use the idea of the number 2 for something, but I cannot use the idea of a unicorn for anything apart from making me smile on a wet Friday afternoon. So, right. So Richard says, yes. We like the boldness, Richard. So you think numbers exist physically? Tell me about that.
I just think numbers are more of a classification system that humans created. If it weren't numbers, it could be something else. If we took one left step, it might have been another classification system. But that one rock is still there. That one star is still there. It's not like it's going to be destroyed if we didn't create this classification system. So I think it's physical.
Okay, so let's play with the idea of what happens if we have one rock without the rock. So I'll explain this. Here we go. I'm going to do some maths, some high class maths, if you're ready. Okay, if I have two people, so the top row of my Zoom screen, normally when we do this physically, I actually stand people there because it's much more fun. But on the top row of my Zoom screen, I have Jacqueline and Jerry, and I have David and Steve. So David and Steve are to my left, and Jacqueline and Jerry are to my right. So David and Steve are two people, and Jacqueline and Jerry are two people. And when I have two people and two people, I have, who knows the answer to this one? I have 4 people. Awesome. Okay. Now, for those of you who do like maths, high class maths coming up, what you can do is you can say, right, well, if something appears on both sides of my equation, I can divide it through. You know, if I've got 4 here and 8 here, then I divide through by 4 and I can simplify it. Now I've got 2 people plus 2 people equals 4 people. What I can do is I can divide through by people, right? So I divide through by people and I get 2 plus 2 equals 4. Now, this mathematically makes perfect sense. I've just observed that when I have 2 people here and 2 people here on my Zoom screen, then I count across Steve, Dave, Jacqueline, Jerry, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I have 4 people. So 2 people plus 2 people equals 4 people, and 2 plus 2 equals 4, dividing through by people. Now, I put my physics hat back on and I say, how do I divide through by people? How do I take, because this is 1 spoon, but if I take the spoon away, I have nothing, right? I can't ever have 1 without the spoon. I can have 2 coat hangers, but if I take the coat hangers away, I never see 2 separate from two things. And so to pick up Sir Jerry's point, in fact, so I'm an experimental physicist. So I didn't, when I said Steve and David and you and Jacqueline, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, I didn't assume that 2 + 2 = 4. I experimentally verified that 2 people plus 2 people equals 4 people. That was an experimental thing to do. I could have done it analytically using maths, but I chose to do it experimentally. And you know, there is a difference between those two things. So when you say, well, but you're always going to come up with the same answer, or why can't you always do both? If I say there are 7.5 million people in Hong Kong, and if one more person was born, there would be 7.5 million and 1 people in Hong Kong. Now I can do that analytically just using maths, or I can do it experimentally by counting to 7.5, like lining 7.5 million people up and then counting them, and then having one person being born and then counting everyone again. So I can do that experimentally. Now I don't, because my life is too short, but I could. And in physics, there are certain things where you go, well, it kind of seems obvious that 1 + 1 should equal 2, but let's do it just to make sure. And so, for example, if I'm counting modulo 2, right? If I have something which just flips like this, and I call this 0, and I call this 1, and I have an arithmetic whereby when I add 1, I just change, I can't bend my thumb backwards, do it with a spoon. Okay, this is 0, this is 1, and when I add 1, I just change the orientation of my spoon. So I add 1, and I add another 1. This is how counting works in binary. And so if I have 0 and I add 1, 0 + 1 is 1, and 1 + 1 is 0. And so if I have a system that works in binary, then I can experimentally check and I can say, hey, look, this doesn't follow the normal rules of arithmetic. And in quantum mechanics for logic, it turns out that your system doesn't follow the normal rules of logic. So we don't assume maths, or we don't have to assume maths in physics. So when I counted people, I really was doing an experiment, not maths. That was a very long explanation for something, but here we go. It just, the point I'm trying to make is maths and the physical world are two separate things. And the physical world happens to very frequently follow maths. And that in itself is a bit of a puzzle. But we cannot simply identify and say 1 star and 1 star is the same as 1 + 1, because we can't, in the real world, physical world, take out the stars. We never see 1. Okay, with that rant aside, the bottom line of this, and I need to wrap up because of time, the bottom line of this is our intuition is less helpful than we might hope. We start off and we think, okay, we know what rocks are, we know what's real. Rocks are real and whatever, chi isn't. But chi comes down to a coin toss, and not everyone thinks that rocks are real, and they have reasonable reasons for saying they're not real. Like to say we are from what we came from and we came from nothing, therefore there is nothing, it's not a crazy thing to say. And so if reasonable people cannot agree on what is real, our intuition falls down. So what we have to do, and what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks, is to look more carefully about how we can pin down what is real. Because both in science, you know, scientists may or may not, we'll get into this, care about what is real. And people in religion may or may not care about what is real. And when we say, you know, science and religion go together, the first question that people ask me is, can you prove that God is real? Right? People seem to think that discussions about science and discussions about religion get on to questions of what is real. But because science does proof and religion does God, but before we can ask, can we prove that God exists, we need to say, what do we mean by exists? Because if we can't pin that one down, we don't get out the blocks. So that's the topic for the next couple of weeks.